mysteries abound around the world, from strange lights in the night sky to ghostly apparitions passing from one realm to the next. From the great pyramids of Egypt to what lies beneath the depths of Loch Ness. From Bigfoot to Atlantis, they are all mysteries waiting to be solved. Join Laurie Phillips, Lauren Smith, Graz, and Billy Simmons as they search for the truth on Night Callers Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Night Callers Bigfoot Radio. Tonight we've got a very special guest coming up, something a little different than Bigfoot, and we're all excited about that. We're here on April 21st, 2016, with myself, whom I am now, Laurie Hood, and we're also with Lauren Smith, Graz, and Billy Simmons. So we're all here tonight for tonight's show. So how's everybody doing?
Hello, Mrs.
Fantastic.
Everybody don't do
How are you,
one.
Mrs. Hood?
I feel like we should call her, I don't know, Mrs. Hood and Dr. Phillips or something. Just
That sounds like a teacher's
creepy.
name, Mrs. Hood.
It does. Mrs. Hood. You're like a math teacher now.
Just keep calling me Laurie.
Bathroom.
Somebody give me a pencil.
Miss Hood, I need to go to the bathroom.
I don't feel tardy.
Somebody else finally got the reference. That's okay.
I'm going to put you all in a corner. Yeah. Cleaning chalkboards after school. Yep, that's what y'all are going to do.
Sad part of it is I'm used to that treatment.
Oh, my. Sure was bad news about Prince today.
Oh, God, yeah.
Has anyone heard what happened? I mean, that just...
No.
They just said had been sick, and that's all they've released so far that I've seen.
Poor dear.
Yeah. And I know a few weeks ago we lost Mary Green. It was like on St. Patrick's Day, I think it was. Or no, I think it was I think it was. It was more than a few weeks ago. I guess it was about a month ago. And Mary Green was somebody that in the very beginning, she was a great mentor to me. And I hated to see her go. I really did. But she made old bones, so she lived a good life, a long life. So, any news, anybody? Anything new to share?
No.
No, snow level's still too low here. I can't get out in the hills.
Well,
Yeah,
well,
anything moving down here in this end of Texas is on a raft or in a boat at this point. So no squawking here.
Did you see that? Did you see that one picture that's going viral around the internet? Is some guy in Houston? He's laying on an air mattress, floating, smoking a joint. I'm like, hey, he's got the right idea how to deal with that.
Make something of it.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's going viral.
That's funny.
Well, okay. Well, you know what? I enjoyed being off last week, and we're sorry that we took that day off, but I had many much stuff to do, and I'm just now recovering from all of the wedding preparations and everything else, and I'm finally getting my self back on track. I just feel like, oh my goodness, it was supposed to be simple, and it just, I can't even imagine having a full-blown wedding.
You're only half
that
Mrs. Hood. The rest of the world is still Philip, so you got to work on it.
Yes, I'm still at that point. that I can't even sign my new married name on anything till I get a marriage license and get everything changed. And, you know, that's the bad thing about a woman. She's got to change everything. And I'm just,
well,
what
you don't
a job.
have to.
Snickers, snicker, snicker.
Yeah. Well, anyway, how about we go ahead and get to our guests, because we've got several people that are calling in tonight that want to share their experiences with shadow people, including some of the hosts.
Why are we echoing?
I'm getting an echo. I sure am. Oh, well, I guess it's gone. Okay. Oh, I hate that. I hate to hear myself anyway. So, anyway, Grass, if you'll go ahead and read that intro, we'll bring on Mr. Adam Tomlinson.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, Night Callers Radio presents Adam Tomlinson in the Shadow Man. Adam Tomlinson, get my lips working, studied political science and archaeology, which included a 6-week dig in Cyprus. And I wouldn't mind talking about that myself. You guys can play with your ghosties. At Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo, Canada. Law, as well as rowing, at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. Then script writing at Humber College in Toronto. Writing lead to stand-up comedy, then acting where he played various villains on SyFy's hidden camera series, Scare Tactics. Adam Tomlinson wrote and produced the featured narrative film The Shadow Man, which is based on real-world shadow people, a topic he has studied extensively, focusing on any line of inquiry, often scientific, that might help us to understand the inexplicable phenomena. I said that right.
Yes, you did.
Thank you very much.
Good, Grass. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I don't know if anyone out there listening had a chance to see the video, because I posted it. It's going to be a great movie. It looks like it's going to be coming out in September. So Mr. Tomlinson is the one that's producing this film, and we're bringing him on right now. Adam, come on, and how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me on.
You bet. We are excited about having you on. How in the world did you get involved in the subject of shadow people?
I had a shadow person experience, and from that I just had to learn more about it, just because it was so unusual. But what happened? I mean, I can tell you the story. It's actually a very typical shadow person experience in terms of, like, it has all the usual elements. But basically what happened, I was having a nightmare about a man in a hat who was following me. And it was a terrifying nightmare. And it was a lucid dream, so I was conscious. And at one point, it just got so scary that I'm like, okay, I'm just going to wake up. I'm going to pull myself out of this dream, and everything's going to be better. So I did that. I woke up. I opened my eyes, relieved that the nightmare was over, and then the same man in the hat was standing over me in my room, and I was definitely awake. And it was the most terrifying thing I'd ever experienced. Like, it had all the elements from there being an intruder in your house, as well as, oh, wait, ghosts are real or something now. Like, just everything I thought about reality just was like, I guess I don't know anything now, because this shouldn't be happening.
Right.
And
how long ago was this?
It wasn't too long ago. It was about 8 years ago, which I guess is sort of long, but it's not like it was happening when I was a kid or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But,
it's almost worse because you were an adult, because you know, kids kind of accept things more easily. Adults, not so much.
Well, yeah, exactly. And but the funny thing is, I woke up the next day and just kind of dismissed it. You know, as real as it was and everything, I just thought, nah, there's no way. It must have just been a nightmare. And it wasn't until several months later where I was having a conversation with a friend, And he actually said to me, I've never told anybody this, but there was once when I was younger, and this man in a hat came and sat down on my bed, and I was like, oh my God. I felt like I was in a horror movie. Like, you mean this is real? It just came rushing back. So I just went home and Googled it, and there was like 77 million hits. It was everywhere. The Man in the Hat had a Wikipedia page.
Wow.
So it was like, and I was just like, what in the world is going on here? So I started doing a little bit of research, and I read a whole bunch of stories online. They're not hard to find. And I was just like, why is it always a man in a hat? So, and it wasn't
what
until
kind of hat are we talking about here, Adam? Are we talking about like a top hat or like a Freddy Krueger hat or?
It's usually described as a fedora, though when I found when making the movie that a fedora didn't really look right, and we used an Australian cowboy hat. So, because the brim of the fedora wasn't quite wide enough. But I've often heard, and the description I originally used was, he looks like a dark man in a trench coat and a fedora. And the descriptions are so the same. That's just what makes any explanation sort of fall apart. It's like, okay, well then why does it look the same to everybody? And it wasn't until I decided I wanted to make a movie, and I decided I want to make a movie about this, then it just became kind of my job to research. And the more I learned, the more just fascinated I became with it. So, I hope it shows in the movie.
Yes.
And I think it does.
Oh, yeah, the trailer is scary. Very
Thank you.
Scary. Yes. It's very intriguing. It makes me want to go see the movie. I definitely do. Do you think it'll be in all theaters?
I'm not sure if it'll be in a lot of theaters, but it'll definitely be available on iTunes and just all those kind of platforms. But yeah, no, if it's in theaters everywhere, that would be wonderful. But it's a tough thing to expect. It's that's a tricky one.
Okay, I have a question immediately. Why?
Okay.
Why is this being come to see you and come to see your friend? Did you ever know why?
No, and nobody knows why. That's what's so interesting about it. What I've been doing is just coming up with as many explanations as possible and hoping that one doesn't have a weakness, but they all seem to have a weakness. The most common explanation you'll hear to explain shadow people is people just say it's sleep paralysis. And that actually, it corresponds with what happens because, like, if you take my case, I woke up from a dream and, I saw something that was in my dream. So sleep paralysis is it's when you can't move when you're having a dream during the REM sleep cycle, which is there's a lot of nightmares during that time in the sleep cycle, and you don't want to jerk around. So that's why our body shuts off and you can't move. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes it really scary for some people because they wake up and just adding to all the the scariness of there being a Batman in your room, they can't move either. So it's just like one terrifying thing piling on another, which was what makes the experience so just different and to me interesting as well as scary.
Okay, are there any audio, like any sounds like walking or talking or anything?
A lot of people have said that the shadow people have spoken to them. A lot of them also just say that they're silent or just kind of sit there. It seems to mostly be a visual as opposed to an auditory kind of thing.
Well, I had an experience, and I would like to share it, but I'm getting an echo. Does someone have their speakers on? How about you, Adam? Do you have your speakers on?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Let me just... I'll just turn off my audio just in case.
Okay. I still hear it, but I'm just going to move through it. Well, it seems like it's stopped now. Well, no, it hasn't.
Oh, wait.
Well,
I haven't heard any echoes.
Really? It must just be on my end. Okay. Well, when I was about 9 years old, maybe 8 years old, we had moved out to California, and we were in a rent house, right on base housing. My father was in the military. This house was a strange place. It was sat on a sand lot all by itself, and nothing on the lot would grow. We found dead frogs when we went out there and played, and money. We were always finding coins and dead frogs and no vegetation. Nothing would grow on this. It was a really nice house, and but it had no shrubbery, no trees, no grass, nothing growing around it. But I had a front porch that was concrete, and so it was a newer house. And anyway, at night, the street light would shine in through the window, and I would hear something walking back and forth across the porch. And as it crossed the window, I could see that it was a man in a trench coat with a fedora-type hat. All I could see was the shadow. And this went on night after night after night. I would hear the walking, and then I would hear this individual go in front of the window, just like he would stop in front of the window. Then he would keep walking. Then he'd come back. He would stop in front of the window. And it always looked like he had his hands jammed down into his pocket, his head kind of tilted down. So would this have been like an apparition, or do you think it would have been the Shadow Man?
I mean, it sounds a lot like a shadow person experience.
Yes.
Like okay. A lot. Like, was it like all the time? Was it when you were, waking up from sleeping?
I cannot recall whether I think I was woken up by the sound of this walking across the porch, because it was in the wee hours of the morning. It never was like right after I went to bed or anything like that. It was when everyone else was asleep.
Wow. So, I mean, it does seem like this happens. There is some kind of connection with sleep and dreams. Again, what the connection is, and whether or not it's an apparition, like that's not really my area of expertise. I think a lot of ghost sightings or alien sightings could be related to sleep paralysis, if that's the answer, or I think a lot of paranormal events might be described by whatever the answer is that describes why people see shadow people. It just seems to me more likely that there's one thing happening we don't understand, and there's 100 that we don't understand. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly the story, and there are hundreds and hundreds. I mean, there's thousands of people who've had experiences just like it. And, I've heard, people talk about, well, they're from higher dimensions. They're from parallel universes. It could be sleep paralysis. And all of these explanations fail to explain why it's always a hat man. Like, why it always looks like this? If it's a hallucination, then how does everyone have the same hallucination? A hallucination is just,
So basically you're saying that all of the shadow people have a hat. There aren't other, because I've had other experiences with shadowed figures particularly in this house that I moved in, that I live in now. Right in the beginning, the first year, I had shadows going across the window. We would be sitting outside on the porch and see shadows going across the window inside the house. Saw a shadowy figure standing outside the house looking in at one time. Saw them going from tree to tree, and you could see through them. And this was during the day when everyone was awake. And I always thought they were shadow people. You know, that's what I called them, but I didn't know that shadow people could only be a man in a hat.
No, sorry, I didn't. I'm sorry if I implied that. It's not. They don't have to have a hat. It's just the fact that so many do is just what I find so inexplicable. But they've been, seen wearing cloaks, and there's also, I mean, if you look back through at different mythologies, like in India and Egypt, they have the jinn, which are the smokeless fire, and it's so similar to shadow people that it's very likely it's the same kind of phenomenon. There's also like old hags, for instance, which is also really, really closely connected to shadow people. An old hag is an old woman who will appear on your chest and is like choking you, or just the weight of her on your chest. And, but that's also such an oddly specific thing. It's never like an old man or whatever on someone's chest, or, sometimes it'll be...
It's almost sounding like these are turning into social archetypes.
Well, that's an interesting point. Like whether or not, because if it was a social archetype, then that would explain why the visions are so uniform, and that explanation actually has been put forth to explain why people have religious experiences, at the end of life experiences, where someone who, say, is Christian will see Jesus, and the explanation has been, well, sure, there's a social archetype of that, what that looks like, but that explanation, and that it's sort of the mind's way of easing our transition into the next world, whatever that is. But the thing with the old hags and the hat men is, those archetypes don't exist. It sort of happened independently of that. But if you look back at like demon myths or whatever, it's very likely that it's the same experience.
Right.
Or vampires. I've heard that what vampires. And this is actually in the movie, but the idea that vampires drinking blood is actually a euphemism, and what they really were shadow people who drink your soul. And it's just hard to describe, visually, as someone drinking your soul. Drinking blood is just much more effective, I guess, for storytelling.
Wow.
But then getting into what, why they're here, what they want, the feeding off negative energy seems to be a theme that just reoccurs over and over, whether or not it's because people have a mental illness, they're depressed, they're abusing substances. There does seem to be some kind of a connection with some level of trouble or unhappiness with shadow people. So
have you been able to break these down into separate categories of different types?
Of different types of shadow people?
Shadow people, or shadow people, pretty much the dark ones.
Yeah, I mean the most common one is either the Hat Man or something similar, wearing a robe. And then there's the old hag. But it's quite possible that, for instance, like a lot of alien abduction stories sound an awful lot like shadow people stories. They could be based on the same thing, whatever that thing is. But it just seems like the old hag and the shadow person / hat man just keeps coming up over and over. There's a new relatively new meme, which is Slender Man. That's he's just saying
I've been hearing that Slender Man stories.
Yeah, it's turned into a cultish kind of thing.
Yeah, and that more has to do with photos and him appearing in photos, which is something else we do in the movie. But it's sort of it got well known. There was a case, I think it was in England, where a couple kids killed another kid, and it was super tragic. But and they blamed Slender Man, and it just kind of I don't know if I got the story exactly right, but it sort of gained traction from there. And if anyone Googles Slender Man, it's pretty scary. It's a shadow man, but he's very tall, skinny, has no face, which is another common theme of shadow people, is that they don't have faces, or just red or yellow eyes.
Wow, that's creepy.
Yeah,
almost sounds like a category like demons and other kind of elementals have categories. It almost sounds like these shadow kind of elements have categories themselves of different types. Depending on almost who the person is, they will experience that different type or something.
Yeah, I mean it could be. Some people will only see one or the other. Some people are just deal with this kind of thing constantly. And it wasn't until I came across people who are constantly haunted by shadow people that I really knew kind of just how to make this into a film. I was actually having a conversation about this movie I wanted to make several years ago. I was just in a coffee shop talking to a friend, and there was this guy who looked a little bit off, and I could see he was listening, just kind of looking at me. And after a while, he just came up to me and was like, "They'll ruin your life. They'll take your money. They'll take everything." And I was like, my friend just thought, okay, hey, weird, crazy guy. But I felt really bad for him. I'm like, I can't imagine just having to deal with this all the time. Just to the point where you can't do anything else.
Wow.
So yeah, there's this very wide spectrum. There's people like me who it happened to once, and then there's people it happens to all the time. People I've talked to who it sort of comes and goes, it fluctuates, and and it's a lot of people in the sort of, I don't know if you'd call it the four main states where it seems most alien sightings happen, it seems the most shadow people experience happen too. So that's like New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, that part of the country. And I guess Texas isn't far from there, although Texas is huge. But so I mean that's another connection to maybe the aliens and the shadow people are based on the same, whatever it is. It could be a hallucination. It could be one of the wilder examples, like from their people. They could be astral projectors. They could be people who are dreaming and traveling through parallel dimensions. I've heard all kinds of explanations, but they're just all theories at this point.
And there is a theory that some people spontaneously astral project when they go to sleep, and they just think they're dreaming, but they're actually traveling. And
well, that's something I've actually looked into. Also, is just in terms of explaining possibly what shadow people are, but also why we all seem to experience them similarly. And we do have this very deep connection with each other through the Earth's electromagnetic field, to the point where if it was stronger, we could actually feel each other's thoughts. And this is all like physics. It's true. It seems weird. But and that, is my idea that, okay, if we're connecting, maybe dreams are a way of strengthening that connection with other people. For instance, I don't know if any of you have ever had a dream, but and there's a song playing that you don't know the words to. Or I've had dreams where I'm in a car, and it's a car that doesn't exist, but it's a really nice car, and I don't know how to design cars. So how does this happen? So it could be, you know, being connected more to someone who does know how to do that.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's where the archetype of shadow people could live, somewhere in that ether that we're collectively connected to, which sounds kind of, you know, new agey, but, you know, it is true in a way, and that's how, you know, people who will be in a situation where a loved one dies or something bad happens to them, and they can feel it, like they feel a sickness. And that's through the electromagnetic field, and that could be, you know, how we all see shadow people the same. But I mean, that's again, that's just like sort of the lengths I've gone to try to figure this stuff out, because there whatever the explanation for what shadow people are is going to, I think, just because I've looked at a lot of the explanations, it's really going to change how we view ourselves and our connection to the world around us. Or maybe it's just a hallucination and it's just a coincidence. I don't know. But
it's a mass hallucination then.
Yeah, that's exactly what it would be. It would be a mass hallucination. But the problem is mass hallucinations, according to, you know, what we know, should be impossible because they're an individual thing. You know, a hallucination is just the senses that you normally use just being sort of hijacked. So the experience is exactly the same as actual perception. Like hallucinating something visually is the exact same as actually seeing it. So, I mean, that's how the hallucination explanation is. It's compelling because it does explain a lot of it, like how people will say, no, it was real, I saw him, and it's like, okay, but that's how hallucinations work. They trick you.
Well, what do you say that we go ahead and bring one of our callers on, or were they both going to come on, Graves, or at the same time or separately? Our two callers.
I think Graves burped out for just a sec.
Oh, he did? Okay. Well,
he did.
My gracious. Okay, we'll just wait till he gets back. And
what? Jeez.
Did you guys have any questions at all? I know I was just talking for a long time, and I'm not sure if that made sense.
Not at the moment, but we do have two people that are on hold that want to talk to you about their experiences. Great. And I don't know if we're going to bring them on together or separately. Did they say they wanted to come on together?
Gina's been on the show before herself.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. Gina, you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, there you are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm here.
Adam, this is Tina, and she's had probably several experiences with shadow people. Tina, you want to go ahead and share your experience with Adam?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. It basically started probably when I was about 9 years old. I would spend the summers with my grandfather, and that's basically the first time I experienced seeing a shadow person. It was at their house, and what was really bothered me is they had a grandfather clock, and I got to the point where when I first saw the shadow person, it would walk and pace back and forth through from the living room into the kitchen. And the first time I saw it, I thought it was my grandfather because the house was dark, and I called out, Papa, what's wrong? And the figure stopped, but didn't say anything, and then turned around and started pacing back and forth. And I knew something wasn't right. And the next morning when I got up and my grandfather was sitting at the table, I asked, why didn't you answer me? And he said, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, well, you were up last night. Why didn't you answer me? And, you know, he didn't say I wasn't up. I wasn't out of bed. And I looked at my grandmother and said, well, we just don't talk about things like that, you know, because I kept questioning. And then after that time, I knew by the grandfather clock, it would, you know, it has a big bong, bong, you know, the sounding, that I knew what time or when this shadow would show up. And it was always the same time. And so for me, it was very scary because, it, you know, I knew when it was coming. And the best thing that I could do was just put the covers over my head and not look. But knowing and hearing the clock go off, I knew it was time. And so that was basically the first time I had any experience with a shadow person. You know, but like I said, throughout my life, I've had other experiences of seeing shadow people. So, you know, basically, I don't know if it's that one shadow figure that has followed me throughout my life. You know, because I've been experiencing things like that throughout my life. Matter of fact, Kenny, who is the other person that is waiting to talk, was visiting with me about 8 months ago. And he was actually sleeping on my couch in the living room. He got up to use the bathroom, laid back down on the couch, and he was looking down my hall, and he actually saw a shadow person lean out of the wall and then lean back into the wall. So my children, you know, have had experiences where they have seen shadow people. My old house was very, very active paranormally. I would always see something that was about 3.5 feet tall, and it was not as well formed as the one I would see at my grandmother's house or as the one here that I see at this house. But, you know, I would see it run down the hall and up the steps and then down the hall in my old house. So it seems like, you know, I never figured out what they were. You know, I don't know what a shadow person is. That's probably my question I wanted to ask you and listen tonight to kind of figure out exactly what they are, you know. And is it possible that the one that I saw as a child, is it possible that it has followed me, you know, throughout my life, because I've seen them for a long time. You know, that's basically the question I was going to ask you. I mean, is that possible? Do you think it's possible?
Well, it's definitely possible. And because no one knows precisely what they are, it opens up so many possibilities. So it's really hard to say yes or no. It is really strange, though. I mean, we've heard a couple stories already, and it seems like a lot of it happens or starts somewhere other than home. You know, like staying at your grandmother's house.
Yes.
You know, that was exactly the story my friend told me. The first person who ever told me a story about shadow people, it happened at his grandmother's house. And that seems to come up a lot. I mean, the other story we heard, like it was visiting a house that had no vegetation. Why it happens away from people's houses, I mean, I really have no idea. The shadow person peeking out from a wall. This is where it might be a good time to bring up the multiple dimension angle, because you know, we see 3 dimensions. You know, forwards and backwards, left and right, up and down. But that, just because that's all we can see doesn't mean there aren't other dimensions that are higher. And so a good way of understanding this is if you take a piece of paper and draw a square, and then put the pen down in the middle of the square, and imagine you live on that 2-dimensional surface. Everywhere the line looks inside the square is a line, right? Because, just moving along the surface of the paper, you would eventually come to one of the sides of the square. But if you pick up the pen and become three-dimensional, you can move it anywhere on the paper at any time. And to a person living in the paper, it would look like you're just disappearing and appearing out of nowhere. Does that make sense? It makes a lot more sense when I have an actual piece of paper to do this.
Right.
So that would be why, if a shadow person is a four-dimensional being, just skipping in and out of our world, it would explain why they move so quickly. It would explain why they can go through walls. But again, I mean, that's just one theory that falls apart when, you start thinking, well, then why, again, another thing we've seen multiple times is them just walking around. It's like, if it was someone from a higher dimension, why would they just come to our dimension to walk around and pace back and forth by a window?
Right.
But what you said about mistaking the shadow person for someone else, that happens all the time, and that really speaks to how real the experience seems, that you just assume that it's an actual person.
I did, yes.
So, I mean, in terms of explaining what it is, I think the fact that, you're saying your kids see them too?
My two younger kids did. Yeah, I have 5 children, and the younger kids, there was so much paranormal activity at my old house. Not only was it there was shadow people, but there was so much going on there. But the 2 younger children saw the shadow people too. So, I was just talking to Kenny. Kenny was the one that saw the one shadow figure lean out. It actually leaned out and looked at him, and then went back into the wall.
And we need to bring Kenny on so he can tell that. Let's bring Kenny on, Grace.
But my 2 children, I feel kind of bad for them because they've gone through so much from the time they were really little and even up until now. My daughter moved out of this house, and the house that she moved into, activity started. So I think that's what I'm kind of thinking is the shadow person that was pacing at my grandmother's. In a way, I kind of think it has just followed me from place to place to place to place because I continue to see it. And to me, it doesn't matter where I move, it's following. So that's kind of the conclusion I came to, is that's the same thing, because I actually got to see it. A lot of times I just catch it out of the corner of my eye, but I don't know, I told Kenny, I think this was about a month and a half ago, I actually came out of my room because I'll hear something, literally sounds like it's jumped on my door and it's like trying to open my door, just violently. And actually once the door was open and my poor cat was thrown into my room. I mean, my cat was like 4 feet off the ground, flying into the room. And it's like violently shaking my door. Well, I get up and I go out, and that was the very first time I actually got to see it full on. And it looks the exact same shape as what I've seen at my grandmother's house. So that's why I'm kind of thinking, it's probably the same thing because it looked just like what I saw at my grandmother's. And I've seen it so many times at my grandmother's that it was, it looked almost identical. So I'm kind of thinking, it kind of probably has followed me around this whole time. And probably not going to get rid of it. So,
hi, Kenny.
Hey. Kenny's here.
Hey, Kenny, can you tell us, do you think, Kenny, that what you saw, and can you tell us about what you saw, and do you think it's exactly what she's been seeing?
Yeah, well, what happened was I had come over to stay with Tina because we were going up to visit my family in Wisconsin, and I had driven up from Maryland to see her, and it was the night before we were to leave, and she had gone to bed, and I was laying on her couch, and I was aware of some of the stories Tina had told me, but I went to use the bathroom, and then I came back and laid on her couch, and I just was feeling restless. I really couldn't sleep. And I looked down her hallway, and the living room, she has a living room, and it looks right straight down to the hallway, and then there are the bedrooms. And this figure, about 6.5 feet tall, steps out of the wall and looks at me for about, maybe 15 seconds, and then steps right back in. And I stood up, and I walked into the hall, and there was a definite sense of coldness. There was a definite, static to the air. And then I was like, okay. So I had then went back, and of course I had a hard time getting back to sleep after seeing that. And so in the morning when we were, packing up the car to go to leave, I told her what I had seen, and she, of course, had said, yes, I've seen this particular figure before in the house. And to preface all this, I've actually done some paranormal investigation myself in the past, and I've had encounters seeing shadow people before, and in a haunted location. And what I wanted to preface this by is that when you research the psychical literature on this subject, going back, there's a lot of appearances of the shadow figures with poltergeist disturbances, and this comes across in the literature quite frequently. And there's many cases. There's the Nancy Hernandez case that occurred in El Paso, California, which investigated by Dr. Barry Taft, and in that there was a lot of physical phenomenon that goes on in the house, but people were attacked by this figure. And in the attic of the house, there was a shadow figure seen. And throughout, when Nancy would move to different locations, they would encounter a shadow figure along with the other physical activity. So this seems to also be an association with poltergeist and PK activity. I don't know if you've come across that in your research.
Yeah, it does. It does seem to come up, and I think it's interesting that you mentioned that you felt like a staticky kind of feeling, because that's again something that comes up as well. Just connections with electricity. For instance, one thing I didn't mention about my own shadow person experience is he was sort of standing between me and the door to my bedroom. So fight or flight instinct kicked in. I jumped up and sort of hit him, and he just sort of faded away, but in a very staticky way that I compared to how when people got beamed up in Star Trek, it seemed like it was kind of, and that's what it kind of looked like as the shadow person faded away. But there's actually been experiments done where people had electromagnetic impulses just directed towards their brains, and it's caused hallucinations. And sometimes the hallucinations have been of shadowy figures. And it wasn't a strong electrical impulse at all. Like, we're talking similar to a clock radio. It was just the frequency that was carefully calculated. But if you just, you look at the world around us now, there's just so much electromagnetic energy everywhere. I mean, the equipment you're using, the monitor I'm sitting in front of, the headset I'm wearing, the cell phone I speak into, which, that combined with the fact that they seem to happen at certain places, which I'm guessing there would be more electrical activity. I think that might have a lot to do with why it seems like so many people are experiencing this kind of thing. And, whether or not it's more than in the past, it's hard to say, but it just seems unreal that this is happening to so many people at a time when there's just so much more electricity flowing in and out of our minds, and no one knows what the effects are. Like, no one has a clue. It's a giant experiment. We're just kind of hoping it works out for the best. So,
have you ever heard of, in physics, they call them BRAMES, B-R-A-M-E-S?
Not sure. I don't think so.
That's short for membranes. And that dimensions basically have a membrane in between them.
Oh, yeah, I know. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And here we are, living in this electronic age. We're basically building our own little magnetic fields all over the place. And there are different types of bubbles, different types of frequencies applied to these things. And then you got cell towers that are putting out huge amounts of magnetic energy. And you got these long wires that are supplying our electricity. Some of the things in TAPS and some of the other ghost shows, they're walking around with these electrical meters testing electricity or testing magnetic fields, and the needle pops in and out whenever they get a ghost activity. So you can imagine that they're riding these bubbles, either taking advantage of them or like peeking through them or whatever. They run into a bubble or two, or they create their own. It's possible they know how to make their own little dip into this dimension.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Bubble is the perfect term. I mean, I read somewhere, and I don't know the exact number, but it's enormous, that compared to 100 years ago, we're exposed to like 50 million times more electromagnetic energy than a century ago. And no one knows what the impacts are. So, it is quite possible that there's an enormous connection between these bubbles and shadow people activity. Now, how that happens, whether or not they feed off the energy, which sort of coincides with some of the more mythical things about them feeding off, human misery. Maybe that's just a form of energy that connects, everything. How, by what mechanism, I don't know, but there's definitely, it just seems to come up enough that it seems like there's got to be some kind of connection. So, yeah, I'm not surprised at all that if someone, if there's paranormal activity or, like I was talking about, the correlation between alien sightings and shadow people sightings.
Well, one of the things I've discussed with Tina over the time is that there is a certain amount of, and with Kenny, there's a certain amount that we actually send out, and what we think is what we get is one of the old things. And we create our own little magnetic fields and little pulses and sparks or whatever, and it depends on our own emotional output. So if we're feeling angry, if we're feeling depressed or whatever, you got these little guys walking around on the other side, all of a sudden they get a little tingle back behind them. They'll turn around and there's Tina, or there's Kenny, or there's somebody else out there who's having this little problem. And they'll go there and they'll soak up on that energy, or they'll take advantage of it because that's their job. They're going to play with you. And that's just something I was thinking about. It makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Because again, like I said, that there is this constant association with negative emotions and just general sadness and mental illness. And and we do create electromagnetic fields. I mean, that's how our bodies work. We have electricity going through us. So, and with so many people, there's 7 billion people in the world now, and a lot of people are unhappy. It's if you're a shadow person who fed off human misery, the world would be a great place for you.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So
I was wondering though, Adam, I won't want. What about places having high electromagnetic energy ley lines or something like that attracts the shadow people?
Well, one explanation I've heard is ley lines or dragon lines, which I'm not even actually sure if these exist, but the idea that the Earth has energy meridians just like the body, and that where
like
these
a grid.
Yeah, exactly, like a grid. And where multiple lines intersect, that's where they would have built, the pyramids and Stonehenge. So, again, I'm not even sure if these are a real thing.
Can I interject?
Yeah, please.
the late William G. Roll, parapsychologist, a lot of his later work was using geomagnetic energy in association with poltergeist disturbances in homes. And he actually noted that many homes that had poltergeist disturbances were in areas that had anomalous geomagnetic energy. And in these places, in some of the cases he investigated, they had 2 and 3 times the normal level of just geomagnetic energy in a particular area that was also associated with poltergeist disturbances. So, that is actually one area in parapsychology that they've been, the last 10, 15 years, they've been doing research in. And so there is a connection with geomagnetic energy, and some areas just seem to have an abundance of it, whereas others don't. Also, power lines have been an association with power lines and geomagnetic anomalies with this phenomenon.
Well, combinations of all the above.
Well, exactly. And it could have to do with, I've read about that as well. I mean, it could be if there's a lot of crystal in the rock, if there's high levels of tectonic activity. Even I've heard that mining can cause that kind of energy.
Right.
So, there are a lot of
I think they call it piezoelectricity or something along that line.
Yeah, well, there you go. Thanks. And that would, again, coincide with why these things seem to happen at certain places. And that, again, turns to, well, maybe, it points towards it has something to do with energy. So that's what's interesting about this is it's really hard to know what the answer is, but there's enough ways of looking at it that you can sort of put 2 and 2 together and sort of become, start at least building a case for what it might be.
Uh-huh. Well, that seems to be a really good stopping place. And I think we'll go ahead and go to intermission. We'll be back. And when we come back, hopefully Adam will share some stories that he's heard. And also, I know Billy has a story, Wild Bill. So when we come back from intermission, we're going to pick up where we left off. So everyone go take a break. Welcome back, everybody. And we had a nice intermission. Now we're back to the show. Our guest tonight is Adam Tomlinson. He is the producer of the new Shadowman film due to come out in September. So, Adam, are you back with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I know that you probably have a lot to talk about. But before you do, I want to bring Bill on and let Bill tell you about his experience. And then we will get back to the stories that you have to tell us, okay?
Okay, sounds great.
All right. Hey, guys. Welcome back, everybody, to Night Callers. Yeah, Adam, that's what I was telling Lori, and most of the folks here in the room know. I saw my first shadow person about 6 months ago. Now, the house that I live in, we've always had this bad energy here. There's always been... everyone here has seen full apparitions, things move, and this has been on for 30 years in this house. But about 6 months ago, and I didn't know anything about them up to this point, about the shadowman. And everything starts up about 3 o'clock in the morning here, and I was actually awake and had turned over in bed, and there it was standing in the doorway. Now, we have enough stuff going on here that we've learned to leave the television on at night. I know it sounds crazy, but it seems to interfere with the rest of the spooks that we have in the house. And so it was on in the living room, and there was a little bit of light. Of course, I looked, there, and it was standing in the doorway. And, fedora hat, trench coat, the collars, were kind of kicked up, a la 50s style. And I saw it for about 3 seconds, and it just dematerialized, just vanished. So and like I said, we've seen everything else, here that you can imagine. But this was a new one on me, and this prompted me to go on the internet and start looking on it, because this was the first experience I ever had with them.
That sounds like a very, it's unfortunate, but it's a very typical type of experience. And I think it's interesting what you said about leaving the television on. Because one of the things people ask me all the time is, okay, is there anything you can do to get rid of them? And I've found that, I've heard so many things like I, hit the shadow person. Some people just sternly say, go away. Some people will pray. Some people will burn sage. But it seems to me that any conscious effort that says, go away, anything that makes that point somehow tends to be effective. I, again, have no idea why, but the fact that you took positive steps to do something, I mean, that's, I think that it's possible that it's not even the TV itself, but just the idea of the TV.
Yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
My kids all had to have fans and TVs going at night all the time. All 5 kids would have fans and TVs. Even in wintertime, they would run the fans to drown out noise and stuff. So I think I kind of agree with what Billy was saying. That was their choice to drown it out or make it go away. So that's kind of why I didn't know Billy.
Right. Hang on just a minute. I've got a car going by. Hold on. It's going to drown you out. I've got a really bad reception here at the house. Our thing with the television, and we found this to work, and it wasn't, kind of tricking your mind into, making them go away. And this is not with the Shadow Man, but just the spooks and things that we had going on. Because they would bother the kids, they would bother the wife, and this would go on constantly. When we left the TV on, there was just generally in the house less activity, because we'd have everything from, at 3 o'clock in the morning, they're squeezing 2-liter Coke bottles out in the kitchen, type of, crazy stuff. And like I said, there's less that goes on with the TV on. I don't know. Maybe it is a little bit psychological, making you think that. I don't know if it, interferes with them or what. It definitely did not with the Shadow Man that I saw. And the thing, what you had touched on was, times of great emotional distress and all. That's when our activity ramps up more in this house, is when, everybody's stressed out and under the gun and things are bad. But like I said, I didn't really know what to make of this dude, because for a few minutes, he was materialized enough. If he'd have stood there a few more minutes, he'd have probably got a 45 round put through his midsection. You do not walk into an old cop's bedroom and stand there. Not a good idea. But like I said, he just poofed right in front of me. Hasn't been back. But like I said, I didn't know what to make of it myself, because I'm used to dealing with Squatch. I'm used to dealing with the normal paranormal stuff in this house, but this was a whole new ball game to me. And like I said, it got me on Google and looking things up, and it's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's funny how they seem to just often just show up and just stare for no conceivable reason. I mean, in just about all the stories we've heard, it's been something to do with walking and staring, and it just seems like, again, but the fact that it's so specific, like why only those things, or predominantly those things, why is it so rarely a woman, for example? I mean, there's been, it's just inexplicable.
Yeah, it's hard to nail down, any significance. What does it mean? Is this a precursor to something else that's coming? I mean, it's up in the air as far as, I can see it is.
I've read about the theory that they're a precursor for something else, and I mean, this goes way off, and it's not something I really have any evidence for, but, people who are, likely suffering from schizophrenia, talking about, how they are fourth dimensional beings, and they're part of an invasion. I've heard them connected to reptoids. I don't know. That's a whole new subject. That they're sort of like foot soldiers for these reptiles who control the government. Which I mean,
wow.
yeah. But I've kind of just learned from looking at this, as crazy as something sounds, maybe there's an element of something that we can learn from. But that's one that I'm having a hard time mining anything reasonable out of that one.
Yeah.
But
well,
again,
it'd be nice if they would say something. You could have a conversation and find out what the heck's going on.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, or I've heard stories where people will say that they have long conversations, but the shadow people are speaking a language they don't understand, or it's just, which is a very dreamlike type of thing. You'll have a dream, you'll wake up, you think you remember it all, but everything's sort of jumbled. Or, I heard someone say they had a shadow person who just said the number 4. So, I mean, what do you do with that information? But, they don't seem too communicative, and they just seem to always just be, mostly staring, almost always menacing, and sometimes, on rare occasions, even violent. But it would have been interesting if you had put a slug through the shadow person. That would be, I'd love to hear the results of that. Because that's a very firm way of saying, that's a firm way of saying I don't want you
Be
in
sure
my
to
house.
take notes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and don't come back.
Maybe he knew Billy's intention, that he was going to shoot at him, and that was his way of getting rid of it.
Well, I think that could be right, because it just seems to be like it is the intention, whether it's saying go away, whether it's firing off around, whether it's saying a prayer or an incantation, as long as the intention is you're not welcome here.
Oh, Billy's kind of a rare case that you really can't compare to other people. See, Billy's not afraid of the ghosts.
That's true. Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
He's not afraid of the ghosts. He talks to him every once in a while. I've heard him talk to him every once in a while. That's after a couple of Shiner box, but that's another story.
Hey,
yeah, whatever helps.
And the ghosts in that house aren't going to get anything from him as far as, feeding off him for anything or something like that. So they might take him a little bit more seriously when it comes to certain things of his own intentions.
When you deal with something that other people consider to be crazy, but you deal with it so long that it's looked upon as normal. It's a normal occurrence. What's going on in the house when it's, it's no different than, having a squatch on your property or, having a ghost in your house moving stuff around. It's, you get used to it. And like I said, the hat man, that was a whole different animal. We had so much go on in this house in front of other people, that you just can't, pictures slapped off the walls and, stuff moved around. And then, like I said, in front of other people, you just get used to it. But no, it might intimidate the kids or the wife, but, I'm not going to cut them any slack.
Well, what about the Hat Man experience made you realize that, this is something different?
Exactly, because this was not something, nothing was being moved around, noise being made. Like I said, I've seen the full apparition of the ghost that is in this house, and so have about 7 or 8 other people have seen, the ghost that's in this house. This was, like I said, this was a totally different ballgame because he stood there, he was watching me for I don't know how long. Like I said, I flipped over and was looking at him for probably, 3 to 5 seconds, staring, probably 10, 15 foot apart. and then just, gone. And that was, like I said, it was just a whole new ball game. And it hasn't been back yet, and like I said, I still really don't know what to make of it, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like you said, you can take them, look at it, read a million reports, of this, and you're trying to sift through it. You're trying to find a pattern. There's got to be a pattern. There's something connecting everybody, that's seeing this, but trying to find that. Now, that's going to be the problem.
No, that's exactly right. And, the connection is one of the most interesting parts because we do experience this the same way, and there's no way that's possible according to any explanation we know to be true right now. It has to be some sort of, other sense that it, my guess would be it has something to do with our connection through the electromagnetic field. But yeah, again, all you can really do is look for patterns, and eventually you get a clearer picture, but it's never the full picture. And
right.
It'll be interesting if someday there is, and we can say, oh, that was the answer. It all makes so much sense now, but I don't see that happening anytime soon.
No, And like I said during the reading that I started into, and you mentioned, the old hag, the old woman, and I saw several reports where they were, combined together. The old hag, the half man, they were there together. So hopefully I don't run into her as well. But and who knows? You might be onto something. It could be a dimensional thing. I have no problems with that. There's so much more out there we don't know today in 2016. We have no clue what's going on still. So why not?
Oh, exactly. And there's so many different ways of imagining what another dimension might be or another parallel universe might be. It's possible that there's other universes vibrating in the room with us right now, or in the room where you are.
Sure.
And it could be, or the parallel universe could be, universes could be sort of stacked together like loaves, like pieces of bread and a loaf of bread. That could be how, or they could be bubble universes. But if it is, the explanation where they're just, the best way to think of it would be like listening to the radio. You only tune into one station at the same time, but that doesn't mean the other stations aren't there.
Exactly.
So our universe could be the one that we're just tuned into right now, but just like radio stations, it's possible that sometimes universes bleed into one another, and maybe whether or not it's through astral projecting that.
Welcome to the Shadowman Show. You've tuned in tonight.
But yeah, exactly. That would be a good promo. Tune in. Yeah, I mean, it's there has to be one of these explanations has to be right, and none of them seem to make sense. But looking towards the physics and just saying, okay, what's possible? Then, yeah, maybe they're just people who are sleeping and astral projecting in a universe right near ours, and somehow, the sleep does seem to be a connection. Maybe dreams are a way of bridging that little gap between the two radio stations that are the universes. Yeah, it's got to be something. Hopefully someone will call. Go ahead.
I have a question. I watched the movie trailer, and I think quite a few people out there watched the movie trailer. And Lauren and Cole, be sure to let us know if we have any questions from the chat. But in the trailer, it looked like these people were under attack. So are these based on true stories, or is it just for the entertainment?
Well, the story I wanted to tell was of someone whose experience was like that guy in the coffee shop told me about how it's the worst case scenario, about this shadow person just really ruining someone's life, and that includes their relationships and ability to communicate with other people. So the movie is basically a combination of every story, including my own and the thought process of getting there. In terms of being under attack, there have been many stories where people will talk about how they've woken up with scratches and bruises. And, in the movie, we embellish it a little bit just for entertainment purposes, but in terms of the damage that shadow people cause to people, I wanted everything in the movie to be as true to life and accurate as possible. Just because I think what's true about all of this is the scariest thing about it. The fact that this could happen to anybody at any time. So, these are based on actual experiences people have had with shadow people being violent. And
a friend of mine just texted me a question, which is a pretty good question. How come ghosts and shadow men aren't the same thing?
Well, I don't know that they're not the same thing, or at least closely connected in terms of the causes, like the energy or the geographical or location. It just seems like the experiences are different, but that doesn't mean they don't have some sort of common denominator somewhere down the chain of whatever it is.
Well, I was going to tell her is that shadow people pretty much seem to be darker, like a Darth Vader type of ghost. And there are different types, different variables within ghosts as far as their own intent is concerned. But as far as the source energy is concerned, it almost seems like the way people are describing it, the shadow people are the Darth Vaders of the ghost world.
It's possible. I don't know as much about ghosts. My theory with ghosts would be that it's a lot about residual energy, because we leave a trail of energy everywhere we go, and when something horrible happens, say someone's killed in a certain way or in a certain area, that leaves an energy imprint. If it's strong enough, then it can appear in the form of a ghost. That would be my guess. My relatively uneducated, because that's not what I focused on, but that seems to be, if I was going to come up with a what causes ghosts explanation, I might come up with that. But it's it's possible it's the same thing with, like, it could be aliens, ghosts, shadow people do have some sort of common link, but I'm not sure. The answer, as usual, is maybe with when it comes to this kind of thing.
Well, it's like anything that we deal with here and within this dimension. It all has to deal with intent, emotional background, what kind of power we put out, what kind of power we're receiving from whatever, our own emotional balance. It would be the same. Ghosts are pretty much us on the other side, without the physical body. So they don't change the minute they leave. They're the same person. So depending on their own emotional content, when they're over there, pretty much defines what kind of ghost they're going to be. I think.
In other words, they carry their emotional energy over to the other side. It's within their spirit. Is that what you're saying?
Along that line. They say you can't take it with you, but that's just the physical stuff. You're still the same person on the other side. If you're an angry person, if you're a bitter person, blah, 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 you're going to be that person on the other side. Now, there are dark, dark, dark people, evil people. And when they go to the other side, they might dip down to an area that could, be a problem of dealing with us on this side.
I have
Well, I
a
think
question for you, Adam.
Hmm?
And I know I'm jumping in there a lot, but what about Grim Reaper sightings? Has anyone ever said that they saw something that looked like the Reaper, a shrouded figure that was hanging around when people were suicidal?
I actually haven't heard that, but it makes a ton of sense. I mean, the image of the Grim Reaper. I mean, if you take away the skeleton face, if it's just a dark clothed, a dark figure in a robe, then it's extremely likely that there's some sort of connection, and that.
Well, I was told a story very similar to that this shadowy figure was seen standing at the foot of a teenager's bed, and the parent kept seeing this figure for a couple of nights. He would see this figure, just a cloaked, dark, shadowy figure standing at the foot of this young man's bed. And he talked to his son and found out that his son had been contemplating suicide. And as soon as they got him help and everything, they got him into counseling and all of that. Well, the figure was never seen again. He said that it looked like all it lacked was having the sickle and the skeleton face, but the whole hooded cloak, the dark apparition.
Well, I'm really glad you told that story, because that reminds me of another I heard where a hat man or a shadowy figure told a guy that his dad was going to get stabbed, and he told his dad, and fast forward like 3 days later, his dad was in a position where he almost got stabbed, and it sounds like almost and it just seems like it's such a coincidental and, again, a very specific thing. And the fact that he got it right, I think that's really interesting, because now I've heard two stories that really confirm the idea that, the Grim Reaper could be a separate kind of thing. But what's really interesting about that is almost, 98% of the stories I hear about shadow people, they're evil or at best neutral. So the fact that, this time they did something incredibly good, it just it doesn't really fit the pattern. But again, like that's really fascinating, and the fact that it worked, and that it's
well, I think it was the fact that the father saw it, and the father disregarded it, follow up on it, then the son probably more than likely would have killed himself. And it was almost as if he felt that this being was there waiting, or either provoking the boy into thinking about suicide, or was waiting for the boy.
Oh wow! Okay,
like he was death standing there waiting. I don't know. You can look at it any way you want to, but it was good that he saw that thing standing there. Yeah.
No, that doesn't sound as benevolent, actually, but it's still. I mean, it's very similar to, that story I just briefly recounted. But there's, like you said, if you take away the sickle and the skeleton face, which who knows how that became. So much of how we see things are due to artists' representations of them.
Exactly.
So it's possible that was.
Well, there still could be archetypes. I mean, these archetypes have been around for thousands of years.
Yeah.
I was going to say that
you put it into artistic form.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Okay. This is Kenny. I was just going to say that in England there's a class of apparitions called the Black Monks, and they're often seen in haunted locations. And there's a very famous case in 1968 in a town called Pontefract, which is a town in Leeds in northern England, and it became a well-known poltergeist case. But anyway, at the height of all the poltergeist activity, there was the apparition of a black hooded monk. And, this is a series of apparitions that have been seen throughout England in different parts of England during the reign of Henry VIII, when the Catholic monks were persecuted, and many of them went and sought refuge in what are called priest holes, and in the manor homes of wealthy Catholics who basically went underground to practice their religion. Many monks were killed, and so this is one of the theories for their being seen. But this class of apparitions of hooded monks does appear in the psychical research literature in England, and it's kind of interesting that you mentioned the Grim Reaper and the hooded figure.
Mm-hmm. But this was in a Texas town.
Yeah.
It was. That was kind of creepy.
Well, I mean, but that just goes to show how widespread this is and how far back it goes. I mean, whenever I hear a story like that, the first thing I think of is this some variation of a shadow person story? Whatever it is. Like even in like Mexican religions, I don't know if any of you read Carlos Castaneda, but In Search of the Miraculous is his most famous book, but he describes being in Mexico and there's these heavy, shadowy beings. I mean, and they're just everywhere throughout history. They just keep appearing time and time again. And the interesting thing about the Hat Man is he seems to predate fedoras and trench coats, which makes you wonder, how did they even know where to think of that?
So, in other words, these Shadow Man stories go back before the Industrial Revolution?
It could be. It's possible that it's way further than that. I actually have a painting in my living room of an Australian cave painting, and it's from 5000 BC. It was actually made for the movie. It was for a scene that we didn't use, but it's these ghostly, shadowy figures that look kind of like aliens. They look like they could be shadow people, but I mean, it's possible that these things have been they could have been appearing before Neanderthals or cavemen. And it seems to be the case that as far back you look, you're going to find these experiences somewhere.
And what about the Slender Man sightings? I know you probably haven't researched that too much, but is there violence associated with these Slender Man sightings? Are people committing crimes and claiming that it's the Slender Man that told them to do it? Is this really happening out there?
Well, I think I don't think it's happening as much as the paranoia surrounding it would have us believe. I mean, the Slender Man is more of a meme, type of thing. That it was actually the specific character Slender Man was invented by a guy in Sweden, and I forget his name. I think it was 2007. So it's a very recent thing that kids will send pictures of to scare each other. So there aren't actually a lot of Slenderman sightings. It's more the images have been created. In most cases, it's probably just for fun and for
so
kids.
You think it's Photoshop, most of it?
Oh, sure, yeah. There's never been like a really solid photograph or movie that I've seen that offers any kind of conclusive proof. But I mean, the Slender Man, I would imagine, is based partly on shadow people, and I think I've read somewhere that it was, but that's sort of how word about this has gotten out with people is, I think a lot of people just think it's made up and not based on anything, but it probably is.
It's just like legends, like the Candyman legend, and what is the other one? Mary.
Bloody Mary.
Bloody Mary, yes, Bloody Mary. It's just like Slender Man is like that.
Yeah, it's but I guess unlike those other ones, it's based on a real thing, which is I think what makes it scary. I'm surprised there hasn't been a Slender Man movie out.
Exactly. There will be. They're running out of things to make movies out of. That.
Well, that's one of the reasons I wanted to make a movie about this, because there's a million vampire and zombie movies, and a lot of them are great. But I'm kind of ready for a new monster, and just from a filmmaker and fan point of view, I'm kind of excited to, as the word gets out about this. I would imagine there would be at some point a lot of movies about this. So my goal is to be among the first.
Well, does anyone else have a question? Because I've got another one if anyone doesn't have one.
No, go ahead.
Okay, Adam, I have to ask you, what is the most terrifying story you've heard about the Shadow Man?
Oh, man. The experience itself is so much more terrifying than like the second most terrifying thing most people are likely to experience. That it's almost like they're all kind of tied. I think it's really the scariest one I heard. The scarier the story is, it just depends on how frequent this is. The kind of thing happens. And if it's associated with things like drops in temperature and seeing them when they're awake, and not just when they're asleep, or that man at the coffee shop who basically told me that his life had been torn apart by these type of things. It's just people are in a constant state of such high level of terror that it's almost incomprehensible just to imagine what the experience would be like. I think, and when it happens to kids, it seems to be, scarier, just because as adults we can just dismiss it and say, oh, it was, we're using logic, but I think kids are just so much more emotional that's got to be the worst, is just seeing it constantly, or knowing that when 4:00 comes, that the man's going to appear, and that anticipation. So I think it's just like the moments that are the most terrifying, and obviously when there's violence involved, that just amps it up to a whole other level that from an emotional point of view, I can't even really imagine.
Well, Tina can imagine that. Are you still there, Tina?
Hey, yeah, I'm here. I'm still here.
Yeah. One thing you left out was all the bruises you get.
Yeah. That started in the house that we lived in previously. The one that had so much activity. I would go to bed, me or my daughter both, we had problems with that. Wake up, and I would go in the morning getting ready, notice bite marks. I had bite marks on my arm. Or my daughter, she'd be covered in bruises. And she'd go to sleep and be getting ready for school, and she would have like 50, 60 bruises all. And I would say, oh, my gosh, if someone was to see that, they would think I was abusing you. I said, that's horrible. And she would go to bed with nothing. She'd be fine, but then wake up just covered. And I was like, that's so horrible. There was nothing we could do to stop it. And as far as the bite marks, I had those. Just recently, I had a bad situation with my arm that was unexplainable. I had to go to the hospital. So yeah, it can be when you can't control it, and you have no control over it, is very frustrating. And when it gets physical, that's when, you feel helpless. And me and my daughter have been to that point so many times, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Adam, is there something they could do about it? I mean, have you heard of others that got rid of their problems, and what did they do?
That was my next question. What is the cure for Shadow Man?
Well, we touched upon this briefly before, but it seems like I've heard enough successful techniques that it just seems like there's no pattern, that really anything you do that has the intent of saying go away, even if it is saying physically go away or you're not welcome, or in my case I actually hit at the shadow person and they disappeared. So it seems like words and thoughts can be surprisingly effective. And then there's things which sound old wives' tale-y, like burning sage, or putting mirrors in the four corners of a room, which there's really no rhyme or reason why anything should work, but those are things that I heard have worked. So I mean, yeah, I think it could be whatever works for you. It could be trying any of those things, or we've heard turning on a television can work. Right. But it seems like the more severe the problem is, the harder it is to solve, which is the scary part. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't try all of those things, or because who knows what works. But I mean, none of them are particularly complicated. So I mean, I think they're all worth trying. One question I have, was there any pattern to, do you have any questions about what I just said?
Well, I leave the TV on. That's been a constant. And like I said, all the kids left it. We had like 7 TVs running all night long. Right. Fans running with the TVs. Now here I am. I'm ashamed to say it, but I have to run my TV all night long, and I have to have the lights on. I can't sleep in the dark. I just can't do it. So I have the TV running, the light on, and then also sometimes the fan, just to drown out noise, because I can hear, where Kenny was mentioning in the hall, I can hear walking and banging all night long. And so if I do that, it drowns it out, so I don't hear it. So like you said, that does help, like Billy said, it does help with other things. It drowns it out, so I don't hear it, or, it gets off my mind. But there's absolutely no way I can sleep in the dark. And it's kind of sad, because at my age, I should be able to sleep in the dark, but I can't. So I've tried different things.
I probably won't tonight.
I've tried different things. I've tried different things, I've tried all kinds of things to see if it would work. I'm not giving up. I'm going to keep trying different things. But, I was kind of, glad you were coming on, because I thought, well, maybe you had some kind of an idea of exactly what we're dealing with here, because I've heard so many different things that, I'm kind of, a little bit confused that maybe, you could give me a better idea of exactly what. Because when I was a kid, like I said, to hear that clock, I could never own a grandfather clock, to hear the volume sound, boom, boom, because I knew it's counting down, that right, if I heard it now, that would terrify me. I would never be able to own a clock like that. But then at first time when I first heard that pacing, what shocked me, I'm still remembering it, when I yelled out thinking it was my grandfather. It did stop. So I think it did recognize the fact that I yelled out, I said, Grandpa. But it recognized that I was speaking. Is that unusual?
No, it's not at all. And in fact, I've heard a lot of people suggesting or saying outright that they're insecure, that there's something insecure about them, and that they're kind of like bullies in a way, and that just standing up to the bully is sometimes all it takes. Now, why that's true, I'm not really sure, but it just seems to be like in my case, like you just mentioned, that speaking out actually does something. And, or being a former police officer and just not being scared of them. I think,
you have to pretty much change your own channel. You have to change the frequency that you're putting out. Because they're living on fear, they're living on anger, they're living on all the negative energy things. You have to change your own channel. And what kind of energy are you putting out that they can't handle? I mean, they won't be able to deal with it anymore.
Right.
Right, and I mean the fact that it happened every day at 4:00, and once 3:30 comes along, you're probably terrified. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Definitely.
Because you're putting out that fear, and it's exactly what they feed off or whatever it is.
Oh yeah, I mean exactly that was it. I mean that's exactly it. I mean because I knew. I was terrified as a kid at my grandmother's because that clock would chime every half hour, ding, ding, ding. I mean, I knew it was coming. And so I was terrified. And so I think that's where it got a lot of its energy. I mean, I was just terrified. I asked them to turn the clock off, do all kinds of things. They just wouldn't do it. So as a kid, I'm sure it set off of that. Positive it did. But, I'm a little high-strung, so maybe that's where it's getting it now. But, I'll have to just try to think different things and try to see. But I do believe, I guess it's probably the same thing. Somebody called me from time I was young at my grandmother's maybe all through my life. I don't know. I don't know if that's possible, but very odd. I just know that they can recognize. I mean, that's one thing I was going to ask you, other people, because, when Kenny was here, it actually, are you still on, Kenny?
Yeah, I'm still here.
It actually,
I'm still here.
It noticed Kenny. I mean, it actually, from what Kenny said, it looked at him. So, I mean, what I'm saying is it odd? I mean, has other people actually said to you that they actually noticed me, or they actually turned and looked at me, or acknowledged me? I mean, is that common?
It's very common. It seems like watching people is what they do most. Okay. And again, why I don't really know, but the first two stories I ever heard, which were my own and my friends, it was a shadow person in their room, and in my case he was standing, in my friend's case he was sitting on the bed, but just staring at us. And
you were dreaming first that it was chasing you, were you not?
Yes, I was, and I thought that would be really common, but I haven't really come across that at all. Because, I mean, what happened to me, it really supports the sleep paralysis explanation. Because, it's a dream carrying over, and, there's some crossing of the wires. I saw something that was in a dream. That's it. It sounds very nice and science-y. But it just doesn't hold water because, as we've heard, people see them during the day. Multiple people can see them. But, they seem, some of the, common things are they seem evil. They do a lot of staring, but at the same time, you can interact with them and, take steps to I don't know if it's scaring them away or just letting them know they're not welcome, or you know, the idea of changing your frequency. That's that really summarizes everything. You know, like people who have had mental illnesses and it's associated with that, and then they get better and it doesn't happen as much. Or I've heard a lot, or people will take like drugs or like uppers, like speed, and they'll be awake for 3 days and they'll start seeing these things. So, you know, people will say, oh, it was the drugs that were causing it. It's not so much that, it's just that the people aren't happy and they're, you know, they're giving away power and making themselves vulnerable to, you know, outside influences.
Well, that was a good phrase right there that I thought of a while ago, and you just said it: giving away your power.
Right. And and that's what they want. It's a power struggle. They want to take your energy, and you know, when you're vulnerable, and that's, you know, when it happens. And you know, there's other factors too, like the geology of the area. It all seems to combine into one thing.
Laurie? Laurie?
Yes.
Yeah, we're getting pretty close to wrapping it up, I think.
Oh, really? How many minutes do we have?
A little over 4.5 minutes, 5 minutes.
Okay. Well, Adam, can you tell us a little bit about your movie coming up and when it's coming out, and where can we go to find it and everything in this last few minutes?
Okay, well, it's going to be released under the name The Shadowman. It's going to be released by Archstone Distribution, and you'll be able to find it on iTunes. There'll be video on demand and things like Google Play. We should be on all of those. You can. I guess you guys put the trailer on your website?
Yes, we did.
Okay. We have a Facebook page and a the Facebook page is actually under The Man in the Shadows. We're going to be going with a different name, but people want to Google both The Shadowman and The Man in the Shadows. There'll be information about the movie on both. There's some reviews out. We've hit a number of film festivals. We've premiered at Dances with Films, which is a festival in Los Angeles, and our Canadian premiere was at Cinefest in Sudbury, and we're shooting for the first week of September as a release right now. That was a little tricky to get locked down, but now that should put us close to Halloween, which is a great time for scary movies. But what I really wanted to just, you know, for when people watch the movie, I want people to get a sense of what it's like to experience the shadow people in as accurate a way as possible, and that includes not just having the experience, but the curiosity to learn more. It's about the main character's efforts to, you know, find out what this is and fight it, just like everybody who has this experience just wants to know, what is this? What can I do? Is there anything I can do? And so that's basically the main character's story. Is it really parallels my own in a lot of ways. Like, okay, the experience happened. Trying to figure out more about it, meeting other people and talking to them, and just like sharing that common experience, because one of the things people say to me as much as anything else is, "Oh, thank God I'm not crazy." So it's, you know, the main character coming to that realization, but at the same time, it would almost be easier if, you know, people who saw this were crazy. But that's not the answer. There is something else. So it's the movie is about her search to find that before it's too late. So, yeah, that's it. But yeah, no, I'm.
Adam, we really enjoyed having you on our show.
Well, thank you.
A very, very interesting and very informative. And I also want to thank Tina and Kenny for calling in, and Bill for sharing his story, and I thank you for the opportunity to share mine. And feel free to use anything in the movie that you got on this show. And we would be honored if it gives you the idea to do something a little different. That's fine. You know, we'd be honored to see something in there like that. But Adam, will you contact me and let me know when it's coming out, and I'll be sure to advertise it on the show. And get everybody headed in the right direction, okay?
I absolutely will. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Well, everyone, I think that's a wrap. Adam, thank you so much for coming on. We'll be back on the air next Thursday night, same time, same station. And everyone, say good night.
Good night,
everyone.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.